Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As we approach midlife, many of us start to get a little bit hazed and jaded about the possibilities of creating magic in our lives. We get so used to following the ways of what other people tell us are the possibilities of how our lives should be that we quite forget what it was like when we were young, when we were children, when we used to play and imagine and create, and to be able to have fun doing that sort of a thing. We also get caught up into our emotions. A lot of times we find that as we make mistakes, we tend to kind of continually beat up on ourselves and never look forward to the realization that that's behind us now. Let's move ahead and see what's possible. On the program today, we're going to be talking about a book called The Last Shaman. This is a particular piece of fiction that talks about how we can kind of recapture that bit of magic back, or a lot of magic perhaps, to find out how we can find out our own intuitive way to find our own way into the end. Its author was a childhood in Switzerland who was immersed in the supernatural worldviews of the Hermetic philosophy and a life dedicated to intuitive mastery. He's joining us here on the program today to talk about this book, The Last Shaman. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Mr. William Whitecloud. William, thank you for being on the program with us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I can just so relate to your introduction, being over 50 myself. You're talking to me there.
Well, I know that you've had quite a life of adventure as well. And, when you're kind of living that way, it tends to take a lot of intuition. But most importantly, the ability to know that you can count on yourself regardless of the situation you find yourself in, which is a lot of what your story about The Last Shaman is about.
It is. And, I grew up in a country called Swaziland, not Switzerland, although people very commonly associate the two. So I grew up in Swaziland in Africa in a very magical environment, and it was a very wild place when I grew up there. And, the main thing about it was that the people that lived there, the Swazi tribe, had a totally different perspective than we understand of the world. Their relationship with the self-conscious waking world was that, was just something to be seen through, to the supernatural, to the spiritual world, and so they lived a very imaginative life. And that was my first experience of life. But then I was sent to a series of boarding school, and then went to work in Western business systems, and kind of had that stamped out of me, and had the magic stamped out of me, and very much lived up until halfway through my life, lived in the sort of mundane, rote world that we can tend to get trapped in, until I had a life-changing experience, and then was restored to a magical, imaginative view of the world, which is not only something that makes life worthwhile and juicy to live in, but actually is a very effective way of living and manifesting, just the greatest life that we could possibly ever hope to have for ourselves.
As I was reading in The Last Shaman, they would bring up the European points of view, and my question, I guess, comes to, why did, humanity decide to move in that particular direction, to sort of stamp out the magic, as you were saying earlier, about living, about how to conduct yourself and be in life?
Well, I think it's very it's very understandable, because superstition, because the magical side of life can also be accompanied by a superstitious worldview, and then that superstitious worldview can be used to control people, you see, and people in positions of power can then, use that to control people and have power over people. And, just like, for instance, to say, well, I know what God wants for you, and this is what God wants for you.
Right.
God wants for you to give me all your money and, do this and do that, and do whatever suits me. And so that led to, very understandably, led to a position that people began taking, especially with, sort of beginnings of scientific discoveries, where they go, well, where's the proof of this? Show me the proof. I want to see the proof. And so then the thing is that having the proof and having a rational, logical, linear point of view took over and really superseded the magical point of view, which is very, very valid. But because of it had been abused at one time, there was a swing to the opposite pole, I would say, to the rational and logical way of seeing things and doing things, which is very valid and has made great contributions, make no mistake. But it's also, at the same time, a huge mistake to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, you see. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're living in a time now where we're beginning to recognize the value and the importance of the other side, of the intuitive side, of the imaginative side. And it's just so obvious that now, with the understanding we have, and even using our own now scientific standards and methods, we're beginning to evaluate and value much more highly the imaginative and the science and the intuitive. And we only have to look at anyone we can commonly agree on has greatness in our times in our society. And if we look at Richard Branson as an entrepreneur, and Bono, the lead singer from U2, as a creative person, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, as I say, any of Albert Einstein, I mean, anybody that now you go and see them quoted liberally on Facebook, whatever, and we agree that these are great people, you immediately recognize these are not people living in the humdrum of the rational framework. These are people that are occupying another territory, and it's the territory of the imagination, of intuition, and we're not guessing that. They're telling us that themselves. I mean, look at a great creator like Steve Jobs, although he had his flaws. I mean, no one denies what an amazing creator he was. And I mean, we're not guessing that he was using his intuition. He told us that he was using his intuition and the power of his intuition. Mm-hmm. And, we really, doing ourselves a huge disservice if we're going to ignore this and just carry on plodding along in line with the old rational formulaic way of living.
It's an interesting point, too, because I was just thinking about Steve Jobs just as you brought him up because of the other people that you had also listed. And that is, I remember reading a biography on Steve Jobs, and in there somehow it came out that those people who are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones that usually do.
Yes.
But you think about the levels it takes before you break through to that point where people go, well, you're nuts, but I'm starting to feel inspired by your direction. I'm going to hang back. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to watch and observe you, and if I feel that maybe I can help out in any way without really losing face, then I might just do that. But in the meantime, go for it. But before then, you can find yourself in jail, because you can be considered mad. And it's like, how do you get beyond that particular realm where you can explore that imaginative side of yourself, that intuitive side, to trust it enough to not be caught up in that level, I guess. It's the best way that I can think about putting it.
Yes, no, I understand. That's a common concern because you see the part of us that we're looking at when we consider going outside of the rational framework. The odd thing is we're considering going outside of the rational framework from the rational framework,
right.
And you see, what exists outside of the rational framework, the biggest problem with applying intuition, I can teach anyone to be phenomenally intuitive and even, I would say, psychic, and formulate information that is unbelievable that anybody could formulate that kind of information. You could do that by the end of reading my book, The Last Shaman, and you could do it at the end of a one-day workshop with me. The problem is, though, Daniel, is just simply that formulating the information is not the problem. You can very quickly learn to formulate amazing information, and powerful, effective useful information. The problem is that that information is derived from outside of your rational framework. It comes to you when you're outside of your linear rational framework. And the thing is that in that zone, it doesn't make sense to your rational framework, because your rational framework has a worldview and a consistent worldview backed up by ages and ages, especially us guys over 50, has ages and ages of experience to back up a solid, tight worldview. And so that then when you start getting perceptions that are inconsistent with that tightly managed and controlled worldview, it doesn't make sense. And especially the ego, the rational mind, doesn't like a contradiction to its way of seeing things. Mm-hmm. So it throws up strong emotional rejection in relation to that, and doubt and whatever. And so then honoring and owning what you get and operating from the intuition is the real skill of intuition, not so much deriving the information. And the other thing is, you see, it's just a belief that we will go crazy, we'll end up in jail. The fact is, and I've practiced intuition and I've taught intuition and I've shared it with thousands and thousands of people and watched people develop into their intuitive power. And nobody goes crazy. Nobody goes to jail. You see, intuition is our highest mode of awareness. It's our soul mode of awareness. You can't tell me your soul, your heart is going to send you to jail, is going to go crazy. This is your, as I say, your soul mode of your awareness, your highest mode of your awareness. It's your most effective and consistent mode of awareness. So actually what you formulate intuitively is going to have, when you have the courage and of your convictions and actually go with it and practice it, it's actually going to not only serve you, but it's going to serve your society. And all of the people that I've just mentioned and we've just talked about now, if we think about them, you have to agree that they didn't just serve themselves. In fact, they didn't even set out to serve themselves, mostly. They set out to be true to themselves, but that truth was a great service to themselves in the end and to society. And this is the thing that we have to get over, is that intuition is in some way radical, rash, flaky, anything like that. It has high value, high integrity. And, sure, if we are approaching it from a point of view that it's going to be dangerous and volatile and whatever we fear it's going to be, and we put power into those fears, then of course those fears will manifest, because whatever we're focusing on, we will inevitably attract. And so therefore it's very important, if you're going to be applying intuition, living imaginatively, living intuitively, living from this soul-inspired way of living, that you must then do it. It does call on you to really do it wholeheartedly, because otherwise, as you say, if you do it half-heartedly and sort of gingerly and tread lightly for fear that it's going to hurt you and harm others or whatever, well, then it will, because that's really where you're coming from. But if you throw yourself into it fully and put your power into it, well, then it's going to have incredible integrity and value, and also serve you and the whole world that you're a part of in a very powerful and magical way. And can I just say, though, that this is why I'm so proud of the book that I've written, The Last Shaman, because we can have such a sketchy relationship with things like intuition, imagination, living, a soul-inspired life. We can have concepts about it and just sort of, live it when it suits us and live our gut feels and kind of, practice it in dribs and drabs and half-heartedly. But in the way that I've written the Last Shaman, and it is a story which, makes it readable and digestible and helps assimilate it. But basically what it really is at the end of the day, it is a manual really on living this way and practicing this way and a systematic approach to it, so that by the end of the book, if you've read that book and my book, The Last Shaman, you'll have a systematic understanding of intuition and a systematic approach to it, so that you takes the guesswork out of it. You're then armed with a foundation and a system that gets you focused, gets you moving, and generating momentum to creating what you want in life, but backed by your intuition.
It's fascinating because even the character who goes to look for the last shaman, he's at a point where he's pretty uncertain about what he's supposed to do until that point that he decides to make the commitment. And it's at that point that there's exhilaration within him, that he really feels like, okay, I didn't think I'd feel this confident about this until I made a full 100% commitment. And that happens a lot today. And when you take a look especially, and I'll just use America as an example, whenever it comes time to make choices for the most part, which is kind of contradictory sometimes to the American spirit, if you will, is, well, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to sample doing this. In other words, one foot's in and one foot's out sort of a situation, and they don't fully commit, and that is kind of contradictory to what the American spirit is, which is to just generally go for it.
Well, in Australia, we say you give it a go.
Right, exactly.
And giving it a go, I don't know what it sounds like to you, Daniel, but in Australia, what that means, giving it a go, means you put your heart in it and you do your very best, and then after the dust settles, you see what the result is, but you don't try and second guess the result until you've given it that go. It's very important. And it's true, as it is in the book and as it is in real life. It's very good illustration in the book of the character of Mark Vail, the protagonist, of just how floundering he is and how half-willed he is, and
right.
And then it's a watershed once he makes that commitment. But it's not just in a story. It's in every case, and everybody listening here, I think you all can relate to exactly to what Daniel's saying, is that we all have something to recall, have an experience of that where we just made a commitment, made a decision, put our hearts into it, and that just transforms everything. Suddenly, then we have a clearer perspective. We suddenly are able to see connections that we hadn't made before. We're able to see possibilities. Phones start ringing, resources start coming in, synchronicities arise, our spirits rise. It is just a different mode of life rather than when we're waiting and seeing, trying to work things out, trying to know whether it's possible or not, to making that commitment. The whole thing about The Last Shaman, what inspired me to write the book was, I wanted to convey these principles, but I was looking for a story through which to convey them. And I was in South Africa, and an expert in rock art, in ancient Bushman rock art, took me out into the field. And we even, on the expedition, discovered paintings that had never been discovered before in caves. And he taught me all about it. And in every case, all of these paintings have a crack in the wall, in the middle of the wall. They're painted in caves where there's a crack running down the middle of the wall, and half of the painting on the one side, on the left-hand side, it represents our waking world, and then on the other side is the dream time, is the other world, the unconscious, subconscious world, if you like, that the shaman goes in to do their business, to do their healing or their rainmaking or divining wisdom, that then they come back with, and they go into this other world. And the character in the book, one of his mentors, talking about commitment, and the importance of commitment, says, it is that commitment, it is that intention that takes the shaman through the crack in the wall into the other world, mm-hmm. where they can, really be with their power and function powerfully and do their magic, and it's a commitment and it's intention that does that. And so too then in the story, when the character Mark Vail, when the protagonist makes that commitment and then he makes that intention wholeheartedly, suddenly he feels differently and sees the world differently, and suddenly has a new confidence about himself and possibilities, and also that's what compels his adventure. That's what takes him through out of his ordinary life into the extraordinary life. And you just cannot underestimate and understate the importance of this and what a difference it makes in our lives, because we do tend to end up just living a humdrum life where, we might do great and wonderful things, go on great holidays and all that, but basically we live life in a way where we're just accepting of what we consider as possible and not possible, and are, just bound by our limitations. And yet, when we have the ability to, just be in touch with, have a more imaginative relationship with life, which means to me just being in touch with who you are, and what you love, and what you would love, and what matters, and what you'd love to create beyond just what you've come to settle for in life. Mm-hmm. And if you have a connection with that, and a vision of that, and a commitment to live for that and serve that, suddenly you're just outside the bounds. You enter a mythological territory, just like we read about in all these books like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Narnia, where characters go outside the bounds of these comfortable, predictable lives that they ever lived into this, wonderful life where life becomes an amazing adventure and a challenge, yes, but challenges that are there to be overcome, and end results to be created that uplift us so incredibly. And always, as these stories always tell, the last thing that all these characters always do in these books is they come back to society with the gold and share it amongst their people. And so it's very metaphorical or symbolical of the fact that when we live our higher nature and our higher destiny, there are gifts and contributions that we make that don't just amount to us living a fabulous life for ourselves, but it serves society, it serves the world that we live in. And I think this is just so terribly important, because again, Daniel, the people that we've just talked about earlier, the names that we mentioned earlier, you have to agree, if you mention any of them, what we admire so much about them is not just that one of them made so much money and the other one sold so many records, but part of it, and it's indivisible, is just what they've done for the world.
Well, it's also, William, too, the fact that they grabbed and they seem to live life on their own terms,
Absolutely.
in a very inspiring way, to where, take a look at Bono, for instance, as you were mentioning with you, too. If you were to look at the way he lived his personal life, you would go, this guy could travel at a whim anywhere he wants to go on the planet. In fact, to such a level that people would actually pay to fly him in. Who wouldn't want that? But at the same time, it takes a level of personal responsibility of what he has been giving to the world, that the world craves, hungers, and demands this. So the question is to ask yourself, what do you contribute to the world that would put you to that personal level, besides going to, for instance, a job or a career that you begrudgingly look forward to Monday mornings, and you do basically your minimum to your mediocre, just so you don't get displaced and you're in the unemployment line.
Yeah. Bono is a really great example that you bring him up, because what propelled U2 onto the world stage was a single act at Live Aid in England at Wembley Stadium, right, when there was the famine in Ethiopia, and they were, Bob Geldof got the bands together to raise money to
where Queen stole the show, by the way.
Queen stole the show. Well, you see, I'm
just having a little fun. I was just watching a great documentary on Queen just the other day, so that's how I came to bring that one up. So.
Well, look, they're a great band, but just what I was saying is, I also saw a documentary on this, and when you see footage of that actual event, all the bands are on this big high stage, and there's this massive fence holding the audience back behind the fence, and the bands are just so removed from the audience. There's this mass of people, and Bono was singing, and then he did something like you said. What you said just reminded me of this, because what he did, talk about living life on your own terms. He went and he climbed over the fence into the audience, and he took one of the girls in the audience and held her and danced with her. And, that was televised to the audience, but all over the world. And it was just a moment, and that changed U2's destiny forever. Just that single act of breaking out of the mold, of,
right.
Breaking the separation.
The feeling that the audience is dangerous, for instance, when in fact it isn't.
Exactly. And so he went in there, and that just blew everyone away. And after that, U2 was a super group. And he didn't do it because he went, if I do this, I'll be
right.
I'll create a super group. He just did it because he was just out there, you see. He was just outside of the boundaries of what everybody else is operating in, and he just went out there, and it was, he just got to go out there, and he followed that, and he did it, and it was instinctive, it was impulsive, it wasn't self-serving. He had a connection, and that he wanted to fulfill. He wanted to meet the audience, and he did, you see. And so we can all, it sounds like there's just these few people like Nelson Mandela or Bono or whoever, William Blake, characters in history that we can relate to that do go outside of the ordinary. But every single one of us has a genius. The very term genius now we relate to externally to very clever people that are extraordinarily beyond any of us and that can do things the average person can't do. But actually the term genius derives from something that was very personal. It was considered before, in times before, that we all had a genius, because at the end of the day, genius just means local spirit, the spirit that resides in each one of us.
Right.
And each one of us are imbued with genius. It's just that the difference is not all of us are John Lennons or Bonos or whatever, that then connect, that have that connection. But it's absolutely possible for all of us to connect with our genius. And genius is just simply a territory rather than something specific, rather than an intelligence, the size of our brain or anything. Genius is a territory. It's an area that we can occupy that's outside of our rational linear mind, that is very controlled by our belief systems and is orientated by our experience in the past and what we learn. And, just relates to that. Whereas there's this territory that we can go outside of that, and suddenly when we're outside of that, then we're in a territory where we are what we'd call, by definition, creative, because that's where we have the eagle eye view of everything, and we see everything more for what it actually is, and we can connect the dots, we can make connections that we don't normally make, and see possibilities that we don't normally see. And it transcends our normal state of a humdrum state of being, and takes us into, first of all, a sense. The first benefit is our incredible sense of connection to everything, and in and of itself, that is a gift to just suddenly feel this end of being separate from everything and having to struggle towards everything. Suddenly, we just feel connected. But beyond that connection, which is a peaceful, is a joyful state of mind, is what we actually always striving for, and it's right there in that. And beyond that, though, it is an incredibly creative and effective way of living, where we operate much more functionally. We see things much more clearly. And the way, Daniel, that I always put it is just simply this: is that, you see, if we're going to make an apple pie and we've never made an apple pie before, the way the rational mind operates, the rational linear mind operates, goes, okay, we want to make an apple pie. It doesn't go, well, we're making an apple pie, and what is needed to make an apple pie? What are the ingredients that we will need, and the recipe that we will need to make an apple pie, it goes, what have we done before? Oh, we've baked a lasagna or a pizza or something. And it goes, let's bring all those ingredients to bear and recipe and apply it to this. And it's unrelated. You get something, you get a meal, but it's not what you wanted, and it's not done the way you wanted, and it doesn't relate to what you wanted, and the end result isn't what you wanted. And you can apply this to anything, and that's why the Sufis, the great Middle Eastern spiritual sect, they had a saying that if someone asks you how to do something, tell them to forget everything they ever did before.
Right.
Because
right.
it's that they're going to bring the pizza to the apple pie, and in anything we do. And again, think of anyone great and what they've done and what they do, and particularly look at how they did it. They broke all the rules, not because they were rebels or anything, but because they were in touch, they were connected, they're in the moment, and they were functionally in touch with what it functionally took in that moment to create the best result. They were connected, they were creative, and this is something that we can all enjoy. There's no need to resign ourselves that life has to be the way it's always been, and it's just the way it is now, and just this is what it is, and this is who we are, and this is the sum of what it is, and this is what we can expect for the rest. There's no need for that. We can any day pick ourselves up and step outside into the incredible adventure of life that I think, we're all here to live.
And you will be tremendously well rewarded. William, there was, as you were talking about genius, there was a thing or two that kind of came to mind, because that seems to be a stigma when you use the word, as when you talk about these certain people, as we did earlier in the show, Nelson Mandela, Bono, it could be Oprah Winfrey, for instance.
Yeah,
and people say, that's great, those are those guys, and you see these people constantly lauded and quoted in books over and over and over again, and people say, well, that's great, I'm sure that's possible, but it creates such a chasm that people don't believe they can get from where they are to there. And then the other thing that comes into is the word talent. And so they think, well, that person's more talented than I am. And there was a time I got into a conversation with someone who had simply asked me at one point, do you think I am talented? And I said, all of us have talent, and here's my definition of the word. Talent is simply passion. That's all there is to it. And it is with that, and this was just my definition, with that you can realize that if you have that talent, that whatever you apply that to, you can become genius in. A couple of years ago, I had read a book called The Talent Code. And to me, it was one of the most inspiring books I had read in self-help in a long, long, long time, because he shows pretty much systematically that talent isn't something that's born, it's something that is created, and shows how if you apply the word talent to passion, that you will put the time in, and he figured that it takes about 10,000 hours of applying your talent, your skill, your focus, whatever it is, to get to genius level. 10,000 hours is barely a drop in the hat in the scheme of a life of 65 years.
was that a Malcolm Gladwell book?
No, it wasn't Malcolm Gladwell. It was, and I just
because that's a very Malcolm Gladwell.
It is,
premise,
and I've had people say the same thing. You'd have to look it up. I just don't remember. We tried to get him on the program, but he just wasn't having it. But he was explaining that like you take a look at, for instance, Leonardo da Vinci. Considered a great genius of art. And I've actually read his biography, and you take a look at the time and the area that he sprouted, that all of a sudden there were all these super geniuses of art and engineering that came out of a particular area of Florence, Italy, for instance. And he went on to explain, and those were called what they called talent hotbeds, the reason behind that sprouting of those kinds of people, such as him and Michelangelo and the like, was that there were what were called craft guilds during that period of time, in which young kids were initiated into the crafting. So you could see how they were sort of born into it. You take a look, we talk about Mozart, this genius that was sitting down at the keys of a piano and just banging out these, genius musical things that he was. But yet, his family was really steeped in music, so it was already there,
Yeah.
And so when you really take a look at the reality behind the mystery of what we tend to call genius and talent, it's not so far-fetched for any of us as we may think.
I really agree with that principle. There's absolute great truth. It's undeniable. And Malcolm Gladwell, uses the Beatles as an example, and how much they had practiced and played. They looked like just they came out of nowhere, overnight sensation, as it were. But the Beatles actually had practiced and played so much before they had their first hit that Malcolm Gladwell contends that a modern band today doesn't even have that much playing or practice time in the whole life of the band now, just the way music is now. And so there's absolutely something to that. But can I also put something else to you, another point of view? Because also, if people are going to go, well, it's going to take me
10,000 hours.
I'm in my 60s now. I'm in my 60s now, and I need 10,000 hours. Well, I want to put another perspective to you, is that when I was out in the field, because what you're saying is true, there is a truth to that, but there's another truth as well. When I was out in the field with this man, Victor, looking at these cave paintings, cave paintings that were, in some cases, 6,000 years old. I'm telling you now, Daniel, he showed me paintings that were 6,000 years old that had been exposed to weather and looked like photographs, had been painted by someone 6,000 years ago, and they were in such good condition and were such good quality. Don't forget, they were painted with sticks and ochre, and some of them were just absolutely photographic in their impression. You just go, this is almost like a photograph, and the qualities that they had, and the expressions that they captured in these paintings with the primitive tools and having painted these things so long ago. And the extraordinary thing about some of these paintings, or most of the paintings, is that the artist had never painted before he painted that painting. There's evidence that they never had they didn't practice, and they never painted anything since. It was in that, when they came out of that trance condition, they were inspired to capture their story, and so they went and they did it. And there was obviously still some state of mind they were in, some superconscious state of mind, and they went and they did something that they'd never done. Nobody in their clan had done before them, and nobody had trained them or anything. They just went and painted, and instantaneously painted this. I'm telling you now, a work of art. And so, what I can relate to that in my own life is that I wrote a book called The Magician's Way, which precedes The Last Shaman, which I've just brought out now, which is The Last Shaman is a sequel to The Magician's Way. But The Magician's Way is the best-selling metaphysical book in Australian history, and it's done very well. And the thing about that book is that I didn't even finish school, and I had never written anything, and I am not trained in writing, and in fact had great difficulty writing before that. Just to write a letter was incredibly difficult for me and frustrating. And yet when I came to write a book, I wanted to write a book that conveyed the principles that I had discovered and learned and wanted to pass on. I then applied the intuitive, creative techniques that I'm familiar with now, which connected me with my natural ability, my genius, if you want to call it that. And not only that, I'll tell you something even more possibly amazing to you, is I underwent 11 months of chemotherapy, and so I used that time to write the book, some of the months of that time. So I was incredibly debilitated and ill in that time as well.
Wow.
So with no education, no writing experience or practice or training, and being chronically ill from the influence of chemotherapy, as I say, I put these techniques into practice, and this book flowed out of me. And at the end of it, I took it to an editor, and they helped me polish it up a little bit, and we put it out. And as I say, best-selling book metaphysical book in Australia's history. See,
it'll be an interesting read, definitely.
Oh well, it is. It really is about the mechanics of creating, which I apply to write the book itself. But you see, those mechanics, they engage the creative spirit. They engage the genius, if you like. And then when that's engaged, one has a phenomenally one engages a phenomenally creative potential within oneself.
Now, William, I would have to say to our listeners, based on what you have just said and what I have suggested earlier, that we have now created the boundaries of a territory where you just can't lose. It's impossible now. You step into what you're saying with, very little experience, but you applied your soul, your creativity into it, and you had wonderful results. And I'm saying if you just apply yourself and maybe those results don't come as fast, give it time, because scientifically it's inevitable.
Yes,
you can't lose.
Well, you see, the thing is that's one way. You will find your voice in whatever medium.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's music, whether it's writing, whether it's some technical application. You will a focus on anything will bring you forth. But also, what I'm saying here is that there's things that you can do. There's an orientation you can set up. There's a psychological foundation that you can set up for yourself that can actually bring it on, incredibly swiftly. But it is important to what you're saying, Daniel, is that if you don't have an immediate result, that doesn't mean anything. What you said earlier is the most important thing. Is passion will keep you going. If it's your passion, you won't stop. You see, you will keep going, and you will break through, and you will have incredible results in anything that you undertake. And at the same time, as I said, there are things that we can do that can much more quickly and actually instantaneously engage our natural ability and engage our creative spirit. And this is why I'm so attracted to what I've been attracted to. You see, I through a series of circumstances and life-changing experience, I became attracted to alchemy, and in particular a branch of alchemy they call the alchemy par excellence, which is Hermetic philosophy. And as everyone knows, alchemy is about turning lead into gold. And, that's just as a metaphor, really.
Right.
That means that what it's really about is about going from this egoic, belief-orientated side of ourselves to a higher side, to a side of ourselves that is connected to our creative spirit. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about turning lead into gold. And it is very much a system of focusing and putting your attention on what it is that you want to create. But also what I love about it, Daniel, is that, and it's so just what I absolutely love about it, is that it's not a system that relies on what you can physically accomplish and what you can mentally accomplish, what you can work out and strive to achieve through the mechanics of your body or your mind. But more important than anything else, it's a system that engages your creative spirit and brings in a force far beyond what you could ever mechanically, mentally, physically ever try to put together, that you bring in a real force that we could only call magic, and a magical force that will transcend all of your beliefs and ideas of what was possible, and take you into a realm that is, just absolutely fantastic in terms of what then comes together, what you end up manifesting, the way in which that comes. You enter into a world of wonder, wonderful processes and wonderful possibilities and wonderful outcomes. Life is just then, I won't say a dream because that makes it sound like as if it's unreal.
No, but it's extremely real.
Yeah, but it is. It is. It's not a cliche that the fact that you can live this life of your dreams, that you have to every day almost pinch yourself and go, man, how good is this?
It wasn't supposed to be that easy, which brings me to an interesting point, because you actually have this in the book where Dumani, the character, says, he talks about Jesus and talks about, ye must enter the kingdom as a child. Now, as children, we actually lived that way. We just said, we want to go do this, and we found a way to go do it, and it just worked out. If we got disappointed, the disappointment only lasted long enough until we were able to get back up and go and do it again. The thing is when you take a look at what was being taught by Jesus, and sometimes I think, and I'm not going to point and bash Christians, but sometimes I think they're kind of off the mark in what he was really trying or was really teaching, which was about miracles, that God works through you, that all things are possible. Even the book of Mark says the same thing, that, whatever you desire will come to fruition, reaping and sowing and the whole bit. But the fact is there was a time where miracles were, not just something that was everyday life, but they were actually easy, but we sort of lost our way. And you take a look, for instance, in the Bible, or as you talk about here in the last Shaman, if you can get back to that place, you'll realize that they're not only easy, but they're, quite frankly, expected.
Yes, that's so true. And the thing is, you see, where we've lost the miraculous nature of life is through our misconception of the linear and the linear and rational view of the world, where what we've come to believe is that what life can amount to for us, and what we can achieve in life, and what we can expect from life, is going to be as good as what we can work out, and what we can cope with, and what we can understand, and basically, as I said, just work out. So it's an orientation where we're trying to work life out and apply what we work out. But the problem is that the part of us that tries to work out life, tries to understand life, and get out of life as much as it can through a coping mechanism. That side of ourselves is our rational framework. Right. And the problem with the rational framework is that when we were young, when we were small, when we were born, and possibly even in the womb and the earliest years of our lives, we formulated a belief system. A worldview, an idea of what the world was and what's possible and what's impossible and whatever. And then the thing is that in working our life out, in coping and trying to understand everything, that what we do is we don't look at reality for what it is now. We refer to our belief systems, and that tells us what's possible, what the world's about, what we're about, what other people are about, and within that, what we can go for, what we can't go for, what's possible, and it's just such a limited world view. And the world of miracles is I love that term, as you've introduced that term, Daniel, is miracles. The world of miracles lives outside of that framework, lives outside of that rational framework, and we have to get outside of that rational framework. And as I say, it's very easy to do. It's what Christ said. Only as a child can you enter the kingdom of heaven. And I'm sure he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. To me, is that world of that miraculous world, that world of possibilities. But you can't get to it through the experienced, rational framework of an adult. You have to let go of that and soften your focus and allow yourself to not understand, to not know, and then from that space of innocence, then a new worldview opens up to us. A new perception of life opens up to us. New connections, possibilities, all of that. It lies outside of that rational boundary, that rational framework, and relies on us being much more childlike in our approach to what we know, and not needing so much to know and to understand. It's very interesting in the work I do. I ask people a question. I ask them to make a statement of the obvious, like the sky is blue or something. And then I ask them how they know that, and I just keep asking them how they know that. And it's amazing how adults will defend what they know to the death. And I think that's why we have religious wars and that, because we're going to kill each other over what we know. And you saying that what I know is wrong, and so I'm going to kill you because I'm so attached to it, you see. And I've played this game with kids, and you can too. With young children, I ask them, what color's the sky? And they say blue. And I say, how do you know that? And they say, well, because look, I'm looking at it now, it's blue. And they say, but how do you know that? And they say, well, my mother told me that color is blue. And I say, how do you know that? And then they just say, I don't know. Why are you asking me these stupid questions?
Right.
They're not attached to it. So it's like the full jar. The full jar. You can't put anything. You can't put anything new in a full jar. You've got to empty what's in there, the contents out, before you can put anything new in there. And so, as I was saying before, I'm just so pleased, with the end results I achieved with my book, The Last Shaman, because as I say, we can know all of these things loosely, that yes, this is how it is, and we should rely on our intuition more, and you've got to empty yourself, but then how do we apply that in a systematic way and a consistent way that leads us to living a soul-inspired life? And as I say, I'm just so pleased with myself for having put a book together that can give people this foundation and system for applying this soul-inspired way of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a part of the book when, as we're talking about miracles or the way that we experience reality, where they're out and they're in the forest, and an elephant comes charging through.
Yeah.
And he all at once becomes afraid and fearful, and so Damani actually plants the seed to say that elephant's crazy. So he takes on the reality, oh my goodness, I'm about to die here. Yeah. And then he reframes that reality, and he says, no, this is just a baby. He's just coming out here to play. And he says, then why did you say he was crazy? He says, because I could see that you were looking at the forest as being a place of danger, as being a place of fear. And so I just figured, why not go along with that? But now I'm showing you that you just change that context just a bit to realize, yes, there can be dangers in the forest, but you don't have to live from that perception and that experience. Now, a good example was many years ago. There was a woman that I was dating, and apparently at this particular time, as I was going out to a community college, she got a little concerned one time about wanting to come out and see me, because I would usually be out there in the evening, because there had been a rape that had occurred. And I said, I could certainly appreciate your fear, but I said, I don't think that's going to happen to you. And she says, why? And I said, because you send out to the universe, the idea that you're friendly, that you're lovable, that you're playful, those sort of things. Whereas this person who actually was involved, the victim of the rape, was probably sending out signals that brought that kind of attention to her. And generally, and I'm not saying that I'm totally right about this, but she thought about that perspective and thought, I never thought about it that way before. I said, think about it. You're sending out this intention. Why would God want someone with the light like you have to be harmed? It's just not going to happen, And it was just an interesting perspective that I thought I'd lay out. Don't worry about it.
Well, look, you raise a very interesting principle here, premise, Daniel, and it should be the foundational premise that everyone lives by, because it is a fact that our reality is largely created, and I think it's quite misunderstood, a lot of this, but our reality, the foundation of the reality that we create, whether you can say someone attracts a rape or not, is debatable.
Right.
And but certainly it is just so provable that the definition that we assign ourselves, others in the world, then determine what we create, the reality that we experience. And it's a great scene in the book there where they're walking through the jungle and that elephant comes out, because then his mentor uses the elephant to show him how definition creates reality. And the first definition that the mentor puts on the elephant is that it's dangerous.
Right.
And then the character's experience of the elephant and even how he sees it and perceives it is that it's a wild, monstrous beast. And then the mentor changes the definition that it's a baby and it's tame and he trained it, and suddenly he sees the elephant totally different and it behaves in a totally different way. And this is not just a story. This is so true, and as I said, it's provable. In the workshops that I do, the work that I do, I help people see how their definitions literally create reality. I mean, one of the very simple things that we do is I just get people to sit opposite each other, and then I just ask them to imagine the person sitting opposite them as a good person, and then as a bad person, as a person who belongs, a person who doesn't belong, as a stranger, as a familiar, whatever it is. And people are amazed at how the person changes in front of their very eyes,
Right.
how the look on the person's face changes, how their feelings inside of themselves, their physical reactions, everything, how they even when those definitions change, how they feel not only about that person, but how they feel about themselves. And this is in a situation where the mind knows that it's only a game, it's not for real. So imagine out there in real life where these projections are taking place, and we think, well, this is the real world, and this is for real. We really believe what we're seeing. And just in that, the breakthroughs I make by just doing that little exercise, people go, oh my God, people aren't how I see them, they're how I tell myself they are.
Mm-hmm.
Largely. And so you can imagine that when we tell ourselves that somebody or something is one way, and we see it that way, well, that changes our whole behavior. That changes everything. That changes how we behave, everything that plays out from there, what we even attract, etc. And it all starts with definition, how we define ourselves other than the world. And I mean, God, if you want to test this out, you don't even have to believe it. All you have to do is just play the game and take a few days of your life and define the day, define yourself and what you're going to experience that day at the beginning of the day. You can decide, well, today is going to be a great day, the world's a great place, I'm a good person, I'm gonna have a great day, and just see what happens, and then another day, just take another day of your life, create a bad expectation of that day. Tell yourself a few negative things about the world. Tell yourself a few negative things about yourself. Tell yourself a few negative things about other people, and see what kind of day you're going to have.
There you go, folks. We've just given you something that you can experiment with that I'm sure you're already doing, and you're probably not really very aware that you're doing it. The book is The Last Shaman. Our guest today, William Whitecloud. William, is there a website people can find out more about this?
Absolutely. WilliamWhitecloud.com, and there's information on the books, all my products. There's free resources even that can help people learn more and not only learn more about this path, but also actually apply it and follow it. And also, I'd like to give everyone listening a gift. If you go to Amazon and you go to the Last Shaman page on Amazon, The Last Shaman by William Whitecloud on Amazon, and actually click on the book and open, they always give a preview of the book. There's a downloads page, a page with downloads, and on that page there's a download of some meditations. You can just click on that, and you can actually, it's a little bit of cheating, but it's a gift from me. It's my book, so you can do it. And you can actually download four guided meditations there that relate to finding life purpose, that relate to having peace and serenity, relate to you shifting to your highest vibration.
So a lot of great gifts, in other words, is what you're saying. I'm sorry we were running out of time here. So
no, that's it.
Be sure to get, so it's WilliamWhitecloud.com. Very good. William, thank you for joining us. The book is The Last Shaman. We encourage you to pick that up if you want to live a life of miracles and purpose that fit within you. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This was the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.